The lawsuit that should have broken me. Naomi Carter, a successful corporate attorney, receives a lawsuit from her own younger sister accusing her of manipulating $2,847,500 in family assets. While her parents publicly side with Brianna and brand Naomi as cold and ungrateful, Naomi remains composed because she already holds a hidden legal advantage that no one else knows exists. Target word count, 600 at exactly 9:17 a.m. On a humid Tuesday morning, a process server handed me an envelope that carried more weight than its few sheets of paper should have. Inside was a lawsuit accusing me of fraud involving $2,847,500 in family assets. The plaintiff was my younger sister, Brianna Carter. I thanked the man, closed my office door, and placed the envelope neatly on my walnut desk. Then I smiled. Most people would have expected panic. Maybe anger. Maybe tears. Instead, I poured another cup of black coffee and looked through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Atlanta. The city moved exactly as it had 5 minutes earlier, unaware that my own family had officially declared war. They thought they were winning. What they didn't know was that lawsuits rarely frightened attorneys. Especially attorneys who had already anticipated every move. My phone vibrated before I finished reading the complaint. My mother's name flashed across the screen. I answered. "Naomi," she said without greeting, "you forced Brianna into this. If you had been less selfish, none of this would have happened." I listened quietly. "You've always cared more about money than family," she continued. "You're so cold." "I understand that's how you feel," I replied evenly. She sighed dramatically. "Your father agrees. Everyone agrees." I glanced back at the lawsuit. "No," I said softly. "Not everyone." She ended the call before I could say another word. Silence settled over my office, interrupted only by the distant hum of traffic and the quiet rhythm of my air conditioner. I had heard those accusations before. Cold. Ungrateful. Difficult. Those words had followed me since childhood. Being the darker-skinned daughter in a family obsessed with appearances taught me early that excellence rarely outweighed perception. I earned scholarships while Brianna received celebrations. I built my career one exhausting hour at a time while she received endless second chances. Still, I never imagined she would sign her name beneath allegations she knew were false. Or perhaps she believed them. Either possibility was heartbreaking. At 10:42 a.m., notifications flooded my phone. My father had posted a public statement. "Our family has suffered because of greed. We stand with Brianna as she fights for justice." Hundreds of comments followed within minutes. People praised his courage. Others condemned me without asking a single question. I closed the application. Public opinion had never determined legal truth. Evidence did. I opened the complaint again and studied every paragraph with practiced precision. The allegations were carefully written but strangely selective. Important dates had disappeared. Certain financial transfers had been omitted. Entire documents were referenced without complete attachments. That omission wasn't accidental. It was strategic. Which meant someone had advised Brianna. Someone confident enough to believe incomplete information would survive judicial scrutiny. I leaned back in my chair and unlocked a secure folder stored inside an encrypted drive. I didn't open it. I simply rested my hand against the polished metal case for a moment. Everything I needed was already there. Every signature. Every timestamp. Every legally executed document. Every decision made over the previous 3 years. The hidden advantage wasn't luck. It was preparation. Outside my office, I heard my assistant remind me that my afternoon board meeting would begin in 15 minutes. Business continued. Clients still depended on me. My career would not pause because betrayal had arrived wearing my family's last name. I slipped the lawsuit back into its envelope, straightened my jacket, and stood. Before opening my office door, I looked once more at Brianna's signature on the final page. Then I spoke quietly to the empty room. This lawsuit was filed exactly when I expected. They believed they'd dragged me into court. They had absolutely no idea I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. Chapter 2, The Golden Child's Perfect Lie. Chapter Summary. Looking back, I reveal how years of colorism and favoritism shaped my family. While I earned every opportunity through hard work, my younger sister, Brianna, was celebrated simply for fitting the image my parents valued. Her partnership with wealthy businessman Ethan Walker appears successful on the surface, but I begin noticing financial inconsistencies that everyone else chooses to ignore. Target word count, 900. Looking back, I realized the lawsuit had not begun inside a courtroom. It had started decades earlier around our family's dinner table. Long before anyone accused me of stealing $2,847,500, I had learned exactly where I stood inside my own home. I was the daughter who achieved. Brianna was the daughter who belonged. The difference mattered more than I wanted to admit. Growing up, relatives loved comparing us without realizing they were building invisible walls between two little girls. Brianna inherited our mother's lighter complexion, soft curls, and effortless smile. I inherited my grandmother's deep brown skin, determined eyes, and quiet personality. Family gatherings always sounded the same. Brianna is so beautiful. Naomi is smart. People spoke those words like compliments. I eventually understood they weren't equal. Beauty opened doors. Intelligence was expected to build its own. My father reinforced that lesson every chance he found. He believed reputation was a currency more valuable than honesty. Every conversation became another lecture about appearances, influential friends, expensive neighborhoods, and people whose last names mattered. Success isn't enough, he often reminded me. People have to admire you. I usually answered with silence. My report cards stayed perfect. My scholarships kept arriving. None of it impressed him as much as Brianna being crowned homecoming queen. My mother carried a different weapon. She never shouted. She simply wrapped guilt inside affection. "We're family," she always said whenever Brianna crossed another line. Sometimes the stronger child has to sacrifice. The stronger child. That was always me. If Brianna forgot responsibilities, I fixed them. If she overspent, I quietly covered expenses. If she made reckless decisions, I was expected to understand. Loyalty mattered more than truth. It always had. Years later, after I became a corporate attorney, I believed professional success might finally change the way they saw me. Instead, it widened the distance. My career demanded discipline, confidentiality, and precision. I represented companies during mergers, regulatory investigations, and complex financial negotiations. Every document mattered. Every signature carried legal consequences. My family called it boring. Brianna called it unnecessary. Then Ethan Walker entered our lives. He arrived wearing tailored Italian suits, an expensive watch, and confidence that filled every room before he spoke. He was a successful white investment entrepreneur, according to every magazine profile my father proudly shared with friends. My parents admired him immediately. My father practically introduced him as the son he never had. "You should learn something from Ethan," he told me during dinner one evening. "He understands real success." I smiled politely. "I understand contracts," I replied. Ethan laughed before taking another sip of wine. "Contracts don't make people powerful," he said. "Relationships do." His tone remained friendly. His eyes didn't. He looked at me as though my accomplishments belonged inside a much smaller room than his. Later that evening, Brianna proudly announced she and Ethan were launching a family investment partnership involving several inherited properties and trust assets. Everyone applauded. I asked one question. Who's handling compliance and fiduciary oversight? The room became strangely quiet. Ethan leaned back comfortably. You lawyers always worry too much. I worry because regulators do, I answered. He smiled. I've been making money longer than you've been practicing law. My father chuckled. See? That's confidence. No, I thought quietly. That's exposure. I said nothing else. There was no benefit in arguing with people who had already decided who was right. Over the following months, I watched their business expand surprisingly fast. Luxury vehicles appeared. Vacations became more extravagant. Social media filled with photographs of charity galas, private clubs, and smiling investors. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. As an attorney, patterns attracted my attention more than promises. Certain trust distributions occurred unusually close together. Property transfers happened without corresponding tax adjustments. Corporate entities changed names repeatedly within short periods. None of those details proved fraud individually. Together, they raised questions. Questions no one else seemed interested in asking. One afternoon, I reviewed publicly available property filings while eating lunch between client meetings. Several parcel identification numbers didn't match the valuation reports Brianna had proudly shown our family weeks earlier. That discrepancy bothered me. Not because mistakes were impossible. Because sophisticated people rarely made that many of them. I requested additional public records through entirely legal channels. The paperwork revealed more inconsistencies. Different mailing addresses. Conflicting ownership percentages. Unusual timing between asset transfers. Every answer produced another question. Every document connected to another. They had absolutely no idea I noticed details others dismissed as harmless clerical errors. At another family dinner, Ethan caught me studying one of the financial summaries lying beside my father's plate. He smiled confidently. Still trying to understand how successful people operate? I understand financial statements, I answered calmly. He laughed again. No, Naomi. You understand rules. People like me make the rules. My father nodded approvingly. Brianna squeezed Ethan's hand proudly. They believed confidence sounded like truth. I simply folded the report and placed it back on the table. People who built honest wealth welcomed scrutiny. People hiding something feared questions more than accusations. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone. Not yet. But instinct had carried me through every major case of my career, and it whispered the same warning now. Something underneath their polished success didn't balance. The numbers were talking. Only I seemed willing to listen. What they didn't know was that every lie leaves a financial trail. Chapter 3, The Night I Stopped Being Their Daughter. Chapter Summary. After another painful public humiliation, I finally reached the emotional breaking point that changes my life forever. Instead of chasing my family's approval, I choose peace over acceptance. A secret meeting with my retired federal judge grandfather gives me the legal evidence I need to expose years of fraud, and I quietly begin building the case that will eventually change everything. Target word count, 900. The night I stopped being their daughter began with applause. Not for me. For Brianna. My parents had organized a celebration at an exclusive country club after Ethan announced another record-breaking investment milestone. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors, while a jazz quartet played softly in the background. Expensive perfume mixed with the scent of aged oak and fresh flowers, creating the illusion that everyone inside the room belonged to a perfect family. I stood near the back with a glass of sparkling water, watching people congratulate achievements I no longer believed were honest. My father stepped onto the small stage and tapped his champagne glass. I've never been prouder, he announced with a broad smile. Brianna and Ethan represent everything our family stands for. Success. Respect. Legacy. The room erupted with applause. Then his eyes found me. And Naomi. He continued, pausing just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. She chose a career arguing with people instead of building something meaningful. Several guests laughed politely. Others looked away. I remained perfectly still. The familiar ache settled quietly inside my chest, but years of disappointment had taught me how to wear calm like armor. Brianna walked toward me a few minutes later, smiling for the guests while lowering her voice. You could at least pretend to be happy for me. I am happy when people succeed honestly, I answered. Her smile stiffened. You're jealous. No. You've always hated that people like me more. I looked directly into her eyes. I hate watching you become someone who mistakes applause for character. She shook her head with a quiet laugh. That's why nobody enjoys being around you. Then she walked away before I could answer. The words followed me long after the music faded. By 10:48 p.m., I was sitting alone inside my car overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Rain tapped gently against the windshield while the city's lights blurred into soft streaks of gold and white. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I made no effort to start the engine. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to stop pretending. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. Every promotion. Every late night. Every case I won. Every sacrifice. I believed success would eventually earn their respect. Instead, it had become another reason for them to resent me. That realization hurt more than any insult ever could. The tears never came. Neither did self-pity. Only clarity. I finally understood something I had resisted for decades. People who measure love by status never truly love the person. They love the image. I closed my eyes and whispered words I never imagined saying. I'm done asking to belong. The sentence felt strangely peaceful. At exactly 11:27 p.m., my phone vibrated. The message contained only an address and one sentence. Come alone. Trust no one. It was signed simply. Granddad. 40 minutes later, I parked outside the small lake house where my grandfather had retired after leaving the federal bench. The porch light glowed against the darkness, and the cool night air carried the scent of pine trees and damp earth. He opened the door before I reached it. You look different, he said. I feel different. He nodded as though he had expected that answer. Without another word, he led me into his study. Shelves filled with law books surrounded the room, and framed judicial appointments covered one wall. The familiar smell of leather and old paper reminded me of childhood afternoons when he taught me that justice depended on facts, not emotions. He sat across from me and placed a sealed manila envelope on the desk. Then another. Finally, a small encrypted flash drive. I hoped you would never need these, he said quietly. I looked at the materials without touching them. What are they? Protection. He slid the first envelope toward me. Inside rested a signed trust agreement bearing multiple notarized signatures. The second contained certified property records documenting ownership transfers stretching back several years. The flash drive held financial statements, internal emails, transaction histories, board minutes, wire confirmations, and recorded communications. Every document had been preserved carefully. Every page told the same story. Fraud. Manipulation. Deliberate concealment. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. The evidence wasn't emotional. It was precise. I looked at my grandfather. How long have you had this? Long enough to know the truth eventually finds daylight. Why didn't you stop them? I couldn't. His voice remained steady. But I could make sure the right person had everything necessary when the time came. Silence settled between us. He studied me carefully before speaking again. You have two choices, Naomi. I waited. You can spend the rest of your life trying to convince your family to love you. He paused. Or you can let the law reveal who they truly are. The answer came without hesitation. I choose the law. He smiled for the first time that evening. I was hoping you would. From that night forward, my life became astonishingly quiet. I stopped defending myself. I stopped correcting rumors. I stopped attending family gatherings. Instead, I reviewed documents after work, built chronological timelines, verified signatures, compared transaction records, and organized evidence with the patience every complex legal case demands. Meanwhile, Brianna's confidence grew. Ethan became even more arrogant. My parents celebrated their expanding success. They thought my silence meant surrender. They had absolutely no idea silence can be the most dangerous strategy an attorney ever chooses. From that night forward, I stopped trying to win my family back. I decided to win the case instead. Chapter 4, They Thought the Courtroom Belonged to Them. Chapter Summary. The long-awaited court hearing begins before a packed courtroom filled with journalists, attorneys, investors, and respected community leaders. Confident that they control the narrative, Brianna and Ethan openly mock me and underestimate my preparation. Without emotion or unnecessary words, I present carefully preserved evidence that quietly begins dismantling every lie they have told. Target word count, 1,100. Courtrooms always smelled the same. Old wood, polished leather, fresh paper, and quiet anticipation. At exactly 8:43 a.m., I stepped through the courthouse entrance carrying a single black leather briefcase that weighed less than 5 pounds but contained years of preparation. Television cameras waited outside. Reporters spoke into microphones. Community leaders, attorneys, investors, and several retired judges quietly filled the gallery long before proceedings began. Word had spread quickly. A respected black attorney accused of stealing $2,847,500 from her own family made irresistible headlines. Most people came expecting drama. I came expecting procedure. My tailored black suit fit perfectly, every line sharp and deliberate. I had chosen it weeks earlier because it reminded me of exactly what this day represented. Not revenge. Discipline. As I entered the courtroom, conversations softened into whispers. I recognized former law professors, corporate executives, bank trustees, members of the local bar association, even people who had once opposed me in major commercial litigation. Their presence didn't intimidate me. It reminded me that truth often attracted witnesses. Across the aisle sat my family. My father refused to acknowledge me. My mother folded her hands neatly across her lap, wearing the expression she reserved for church services and public sympathy. Brianna smiled confidently. Ethan looked completely relaxed. He even winked as I walked toward counsel's table. They believed the courtroom belonged to them. They had absolutely no idea they had entered the only place where emotions carried less weight than evidence. At 9 a.m. sharp, the judge entered. Everyone stood. Proceedings began. Brianna testified first. She spoke carefully. I trusted my sister with our family's financial interests. She paused dramatically. Instead, she manipulated documents for her own benefit. Her voice cracked at exactly the right moments. She looked toward the jury with practiced disappointment. I never wanted this. Several jurors watched attentively. Others wrote notes. I simply listened. Every sentence she delivered matched the complaint almost perfectly. That wasn't surprising. Rehearsed stories usually did. Then Ethan took the witness stand. Confidence practically radiated from him. He adjusted his expensive cuff links before speaking. I've managed investments worth tens of millions of dollars. His tone remained calm. I know financial misconduct when I see it. He glanced toward me before smiling faintly. Frankly, Counselor Carter built a career around paperwork. Soft laughter echoed from several spectators. He continued. Real power isn't found inside contracts. He leaned slightly forward. It's built through influence. His eyes locked onto mine. You've spent your entire career believing rules protect people. He smiled wider. They don't. I said nothing. Silence often unsettled arrogant people far more than arguments ever could. He mistook my composure for uncertainty. I've worked with governors, investment firms, Fortune 500 executives, and international developers, he continued confidently. People like me create opportunities. He shrugged casually. People like Ms. Carter merely document them. More whispers spread through the courtroom. Then he lowered his voice just enough for me to hear clearly. If you continue this obsession, you'll never work in this city again. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Threats delivered quietly often revealed the most about a person's character. I looked at him without changing my expression. I understand, I answered simply. Nothing more. His smile returned. He believed he'd won. The judge turned toward my table. Counselor Carter. I stood. The room became completely still. Every eye followed me as I carried my briefcase to the evidence table. I didn't begin with a speech. I didn't accuse anyone of lying. I didn't challenge a single witness. Instead, I unlocked the case. First, I placed the encrypted flash drive on the evidence tray. Then the certified trust agreement. Next came the notarized property deeds. Bank transfer confirmations. Corporate resolutions. Email correspondence. Wire transaction histories. Meeting minutes. Tax filings. Surveillance timestamps documenting property access. Each document rested quietly beside the previous one. No dramatic gestures. No raised voice. Only evidence. The courtroom grew strangely silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. I submitted each exhibit according to procedure while the clerk marked them carefully into the official record. Exhibit 14. Exhibit 15. Exhibit 16. The stack continued growing. I noticed Ethan straighten in his chair. His confidence faded almost imperceptibly. His attorney leaned closer, whispering something urgently. Ethan frowned. For the first time that morning, he wasn't smiling. The judge examined several certified documents before looking toward opposing counsel. Are there any objections to authenticity? A brief pause followed. No objection, Ethan's attorney answered quietly. That response mattered more than anyone outside the legal profession probably realized. Authenticity wasn't disputed. Only interpretation remained. I returned calmly to my seat. Still saying almost nothing. My father finally looked at the exhibits instead of me. My mother's fingers tightened around her handbag. Brianna glanced toward Ethan. He avoided her eyes. What they didn't know was that every document connected to another. Every signature confirmed another transaction. Every timestamp reinforced another timeline. Every email quietly erased another excuse. No single exhibit destroyed their story. Together, they became impossible to ignore. The judge requested a brief recess to review several filings before testimony continued. As everyone stood, conversations erupted throughout the courtroom. Journalists hurried toward the hallway. Attorneys exchanged puzzled expressions. Investors whispered behind folded legal pads. I remained seated. My hands rested comfortably on the table. Across the aisle, Ethan opened one of the evidence binders for the first time. His face changed immediately. He turned another page. Then another. His breathing slowed. Brianna leaned toward him. What is it? She whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he continued flipping through certified records that should never have existed. Records proving dates. Ownership. Authority. Intent. He looked toward his attorney. The attorney wasn't looking at him. He was reading. Very carefully. For the first time since this case began, certainty disappeared from their side of the courtroom. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. Nobody laughed. Nobody looked triumphant. For the first time all morning, they stopped looking at me and started looking at each other. Chapter 5. Her own lies became the evidence. Chapter summary. Cross-examination transforms the entire case. Brianna's carefully rehearsed story collapses under documented evidence, while Ethan's own arrogance exposes a much larger fraud involving multiple families. Supported by forensic experts, banking professionals, trustees, and former associates, I calmly dismantle every accusation until the court orders a criminal investigation into Ethan's investment operation. Target word count, 1,800. The courtroom felt different after the recess. The confidence that had filled the room only an hour earlier had quietly disappeared. At 10:41 a.m., everyone returned to their seats. The spectators spoke in hushed voices, reporters checked their notes repeatedly, and even the attorneys seemed more cautious than before. I organized my exhibits one final time and waited for the judge to resume proceedings. My pulse remained steady. Preparation had replaced fear months ago. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Counselor Carter," he said, "you may proceed with cross-examination." I stood. "Thank you, Your Honor." Brianna returned to the witness stand with the same confident smile she had worn earlier, but I noticed subtle differences. She avoided looking directly at the evidence binders. Her hands remained folded tightly together. Her breathing had become noticeably slower. People often underestimated silence. Silence invited people to keep talking. And people who talked too much usually revealed more than they intended. I approached the witness box without carrying a single document. "Good morning, Brianna." She nodded. "Good morning. You testified earlier that I controlled every financial decision involving the Carter Family Trust." "Yes." "And that testimony remains true today?" "Absolutely." I paused. "Even under oath?" She hesitated for less than a second. "Yes." I walked to the evidence table and retrieved Exhibit 22. "Would you please review the electronic authorization dated March 18, 2023, at 2:14 p.m.?" She accepted the document confidently. Her expression changed before she reached the second page. "Do you recognize your electronic signature?" You may answer. "Yes." "So you personally approved that transaction?" "Yes, but..." I waited. "But Ethan explained everything." "I appreciate that." I nodded politely. "My question wasn't about Ethan." Another silence. "You approved the transfer?" "Yes." I placed the document back on the table. "Earlier you testified you had no authority over trust distributions." She looked toward her attorney. Then back at me. "I misunderstood." "I understand." I retrieved another exhibit. "Let's avoid misunderstandings." The courtroom remained completely silent. Every page introduced another contradiction. Every answer erased another part of her original testimony. By 11:06 a.m., I displayed authenticated email correspondence exchanged over 6 months. "Brianna, would you please read the highlighted sentence aloud?" She swallowed quietly. "Move the properties before Naomi notices the discrepancies." "Who wrote that email?" "I did." "And who received it?" "Ethan." No further clarification needed. Her shoulders dropped slightly. The confidence that had carried her into the courtroom was slowly dissolving. They had absolutely no idea how carefully digital evidence preserved truth. Electronic records rarely forgot. People did. I submitted certified server logs verifying timestamps. Metadata reports confirmed authorship. The court accepted every exhibit without objection. Then I introduced recorded telephone conversations obtained through lawful discovery. The courtroom audio system played Brianna's voice. "We just need Naomi to believe everything is already finalized." Another recording followed. "If she reviews the trust amendments, everything falls apart." Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. The only sound came from the speakers. When the recording ended, Brianna stared at the table. I was pressured. "By whom?" "Ethan." I nodded once. "So your earlier testimony was false?" Tears gathered in her eyes. "Yes." She spoke so quietly several jurors leaned forward to hear. "It was." I thanked her. Then I sat down. No celebration. No dramatic reaction. Truth didn't require performance. The judge instructed Brianna to remain available before calling Ethan Walker back to the stand. He approached with forced confidence, straightening his tie repeatedly before taking the oath. His smile returned. Barely. I stood once more. "Mr. Walker, you've described yourself as an experienced investment professional." "Correct." "You've managed multi-million-dollar portfolios." "Yes." "You understand fiduciary responsibility." "Of course." I opened Exhibit 41. "Please identify this wire transfer." He glanced briefly at the page. "I don't recognize it." I placed another document beside the first. "Perhaps this authorization helps." His expression tightened. "It doesn't." I introduced a third exhibit. The receiving bank confirmed the transaction. The originating institution confirmed authorization. Digital authentication confirmed his encrypted signature. I looked toward him calmly. "Do you still deny approving this transfer?" "It could have been delegated." "To whom?" "I don't remember." I nodded. "Interesting." I displayed another email. The message included his exact instructions regarding the same transaction. His signature appeared beneath it. The courtroom became perfectly still. His attorney slowly closed his notebook. I continued. "You previously testified these transfers benefited only Carter family assets." "That's right." I pressed a button. A detailed financial chart appeared on the courtroom monitor. Colored lines connected dozens of accounts. Corporate entities. Holding companies. Real estate partnerships. Family trusts. The flow of money became unmistakably clear. "Can you explain why inherited properties belonging to 12 unrelated black families were transferred into shell companies under your control?" He frowned. "They invested willingly." "For full market value?" "I assume so." I opened another certified appraisal. Several properties were transferred for less than 20% of their assessed value. They signed. They relied upon your representations. They should have read everything. His answer echoed through the courtroom. Several reporters immediately began typing. I waited. Then asked quietly. "So you admit they transferred ownership because they trusted your investment advice?" He realized the mistake almost immediately. "I didn't say that." "You just did." His jaw tightened. "They made their own decisions. Using financial information you provided." "No." I lifted another exhibit. "This recorded presentation contains your exact seminar." The courtroom speakers played his voice. "I specialize in protecting black generational wealth." Another recording followed. "Trust me. I'll handle every legal detail." The recording ended. I looked toward him. "Were those your words?" He remained silent. The judge intervened. "The witness will answer." "Yes." "Thank you." His confidence disappeared completely. Instead of responding carefully, he began interrupting every question. "That's out of context." You don't understand investments. This entire case is political. The judge warned him twice. He ignored both warnings. By the third interruption, frustration replaced arrogance. You lawyers twist everything. He pointed toward me. She doesn't understand how wealth actually works. I remained calm. The court isn't evaluating theories, Mr. Walker. I held up another certified banking record. It's evaluating documented transactions. He laughed bitterly. Everyone moves money that way. Several heads lifted immediately. He covered his mouth. Too late. The courtroom had heard him. His attorney closed his eyes briefly. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Walker. Silence followed. He had accidentally admitted industry-wide knowledge of the very conduct under investigation. He tried correcting himself. I meant. The judge raised one hand. Stop. No further explanation could repair the damage. The afternoon session introduced expert witnesses. A forensic accountant explained how transaction histories established intentional concealment. Every transfer matched the chronology I had assembled months earlier. A senior banking executive authenticated wire confirmations and digital authorizations. A trust administrator confirmed amendments had been executed under misleading disclosures. Former business partners described identical investment patterns affecting additional families. None of them relied on opinions. Only records. Only facts. Only documentation. Each witness strengthened the previous one. Each exhibit connected seamlessly to another. By 4:18 p.m., the case no longer centered on my family's accusations. It had become evidence of a much broader fraudulent investment scheme. I spoke very little throughout the afternoon. Questions. Documents. Confirmation. Nothing more. There was no need for anger. The evidence carried its own voice. The judge reviewed the final exhibits carefully before removing his glasses. This court finds the plaintiff's claims unsupported by credible evidence. He paused. Multiple material misrepresentations have been established. The room remained silent. The complaint against Counselor Naomi Carter is hereby dismissed with prejudice. I closed my notebook quietly. No smile. No celebration. The judge continued. Furthermore, based upon testimony and documentary evidence introduced during these proceedings, this matter is referred to the appropriate authorities for immediate criminal investigation into potential fraud, conspiracy, fiduciary misconduct, and related financial offenses involving Ethan Walker and associated entities. Gasps spread across the gallery. Journalists rushed toward the courtroom doors. My father stared motionless at the defense table. My mother's hands trembled. Brianna covered her face. Ethan looked at the evidence that had destroyed his carefully constructed reputation. He had spent years believing confidence could outrun documentation. It never could. As court adjourned, I gathered my briefcase exactly as I had that morning. Nothing about my movements changed. The case had never been about humiliating anyone. It had always been about allowing facts to reach daylight. I walked toward the exit without looking back. Behind me, attorneys, investigators, and reporters surrounded the people who had once believed themselves untouchable. I never needed revenge. I only needed the truth to speak louder than their lies. Chapter 6. Some victories cost you your family. Chapter summary. Months after the courtroom battle, justice continues unfolding beyond the verdict. Ethan's fraudulent empire collapses, my family's carefully protected image crumbles, and innocent families begin reclaiming what was stolen from them. Although I leave with financial security, my greatest victory is discovering that peace is worth far more than acceptance. Target word count, 706 months passed faster than I expected. The headlines changed first. Every major business publication that once celebrated Ethan Walker now documented his downfall with the same enthusiasm they had once reserved for his success. Federal investigators expanded their case after uncovering fraudulent investment practices stretching across multiple states. Civil lawsuits multiplied almost weekly, and prosecutors announced charges involving financial fraud, conspiracy, and fiduciary misconduct. His carefully polished empire collapsed piece by piece. Luxury offices emptied. Corporate partnerships disappeared. Investors demanded accountability. The man who once believed influence mattered more than integrity discovered that evidence always outlived reputation. They had absolutely no idea that one courtroom would become the beginning instead of the ending. Brianna's world unraveled differently. There were no flashing cameras outside her home. No dramatic arrests. Only silence. Friends stopped calling. Professional opportunities quietly disappeared. Every online search connected her name to public court records and sworn testimony that contradicted itself repeatedly. She eventually released a carefully written statement accepting responsibility for participating in decisions she should have questioned. I read it once. Then closed the page. Some apologies arrive only after consequences become unavoidable. My father experienced the slowest downfall of all. For decades he had built his identity around status, influence, and appearances. Community organizations quietly removed him from leadership positions. Invitations stopped arriving. Business associates who once admired his confidence now avoided uncomfortable conversations about the trial. He lost something money could never replace. Credibility. My mother visited me one rainy afternoon. She looked older than I remembered. Not because of time. Because disappointment leaves its own fingerprints. She sat across from me in my office, wrapping both hands around a cup of untouched tea. I thought protecting the family meant protecting Brianna, she admitted softly. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, she looked at me. I confused loyalty with honesty. I nodded. So did all of us. There was sadness between us. But no anger. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not always the same decision. When she left, I wished her peace. Nothing more. My own work had only begun. The court appointed independent trustees to oversee recovery efforts for families harmed by Ethan's investment network. Because I already understood the documentation better than almost anyone involved, I volunteered countless hours helping attorneys reconstruct ownership histories, verify trust amendments, and negotiate legal settlements. One by one, inherited properties returned to their rightful owners. Family trusts were restored. Stolen equity found its way home. Watching elderly grandparents receive corrected deeds meant more to me than winning the lawsuit ever had. That was the victory I carried with me. Not headlines. Not recognition. Justice. Financially, I never had to worry again. The settlements, restored trust assets, and years of disciplined planning secured my future long before anyone realized it. Yet the greatest wealth I possessed couldn't be deposited into a bank account. It was peace. For the first time in my life, I no longer measured my worth through my family's approval. I no longer wondered whether darker skin made me less deserving of unconditional love. I no longer carried the exhausting responsibility of earning acceptance from people determined to misunderstand me. That burden belonged to the past. Sometimes people ask whether I regret exposing my own family. The answer surprises them. I never exposed them. The truth did. I simply refused to hide it. If you're listening to my story today, I hope you remember something I learned far too late. Real revenge is not shouting. It is not humiliation. It is not proving someone wrong during a heated argument. Real revenge is preparation. It is patience. It is allowing integrity to stand quietly while deception eventually destroys itself. People built on lies rarely fall because someone pushes them. They fall because the foundation was never strong enough to support the truth. If my journey taught me anything, it is this. Your peace is infinitely more valuable than another person's approval. Protect it. Fight for it. Never trade it for temporary acceptance. Never waste your life proving your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. Let the truth do what your anger never could.